Hi, thanks for joining me on the LGBTQ plus news podcast, Listen Up Girl. I'm bringing you news for Wednesday, August the 12th. I'm your host, Zach Randall-Friedman. Before I get into today's news, I want to ask if you could please go to your podcast platform that you're listening to this on and leave a review or a rating, please. The more ratings and reviews I get, the more people get to hear this podcast and we get to share this information with our community. I took off yesterday, but we have 8 amazing stories today. And we're going to get right into them, starting with Lauren Boebert's Groomer rhetoric comes home. So let's start in Colorado, where MAGA Congresswoman Lauren Boebert has spent years accusing LGBTQ plus people of grooming children. She's gone after drag queens, LGBTQ plus inclusive flashcards, and federal health officials supporting gender-affirming care for trans youth, warning parents to keep queer people away from kids. But this week, her 21-year-old son Tyler was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts related to sexual exploitation of a child, stemming from an incident that allegedly occurred on New Year's Day in 2024. The charges include sexual exploitation of a child and creating sexually exploitive material, along with 2 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Lauren's response: I love my son, and we take these allegations very seriously and pray for everyone affected during this challenging time. This is the same Congresswoman who, quote, tweeted a reality show trailer with Siri defining grooming and was told that the internet to keep drag queens away from children. For years, she and her allies have pointed at our community as a danger to kids. The actual charges, when they come, tend to land a lot closer to home than they'd like to admit. I can't wait to see what happens. And I will keep bringing you the news updates for her son, Tyler, who, again, has been charged with 3 felony counts. Yep, 3. Our next story is Ken Paxton tries to mock a pastor's faith and gets heckled about his own marriage. Next, we go to Texas, where Attorney General Ken Paxton locked in a bitter Senate race against Democratic State Representative James Tellerico, a seminary-trained candidate who talks openly about his faith, tried to score points attacking Tellerico's Christianity at a San Antonio rally last weekend. Paxton claimed Tellerico said, "You cannot be Christian and support the oil and gas industry," badly mischaracterizing what Tellerico actually said, which was about Christian value of protecting the earth from climate change. But before Paxton could finish his point, a heckler in the crowd yelled out something Paxton clearly wasn't expecting. "You cheated on your wife." Security removed the person, but the moment went viral instantly. For context, Paxton's filed for divorce last year after 38 years of marriage, citing adultery on, quote, biblical grounds. She wrote that she didn't believe staying married honors God or is loving to myself, my children, or kin. Okay, so let me just break that down. He was married for 38 years, and he did adultery on biblical grounds, okay? And then so Paxton has spent his entire campaign trying to paint Tellerico, a Presbyterian seminarian who talks about faith constantly, as someone not a real Christian. Meanwhile, Paxton's own Baptist church membership is reportedly in name only. He hasn't attended in roughly 8 years. When you're the one dodging questions about your own conduct, maybe skip the sermon about somebody else. And then we go to Paxton forces a child's hospital to open up a detransition clinic day before the election. So speaking of Paxton, he's also touting new details of a forced settlement with Texas Children's Hospital, which he investigated for years over its gender-affirming care program. The hospital agreed to pay millions back to the state, permanently fire 5 doctors who provided that care, and now must open what Paxton is calling nation's first detransition clinic before the end of October. Notice the timing. The deadline lands just days before the November 3rd state Senate, where Paxton is currently trailing Tellerico in the polls. Here's what the science actually says. Research published in Pediatrics found that only 2.5% of trans-identifying minors ended up identifying as cisgender 5 years later. A 2024 study in JAMA put detransition rates at around 1%. And when people do detransition, research from Fenway Health found that the vast majority of people do so because of discrimination, stigma, and family pressure, not because they weren't trans to begin with. This isn't about patient care. It's about a campaign prop funded by a hospital forced to bankroll it timed to open right before Election Day. Next, we go to two former NBA players declare themselves eligible for the WNBA as a political stunt. So over in sports, two former NBA players have publicly declared themselves eligible for 2027 WNBA draft, and a stunt clearly designed to make a political point about trans-inclusive inclusion in women's sports. Former Knicks centers Enes Kanter Freedom posted a video saying that after reviewing their league's eligibility guidelines, he's officially declaring himself a WNBA prospect, despite not being trans or a woman. On the same day, NBA player Royce White also declared himself eligible, posting a photo in a wig captioning, "It isn't my first wig," and telling reporters sometimes identities as a woman for purposes of professional basketball. White also threatened a legal battle if he isn't signed. Both men have political ambitions. Freedom says he's eyeing a congressional run in 2028, and White is actually on the ballot in today's Minnesota's Republican Senate primary. The stunt lands amid real scrutiny. The WNBA, after a player's comments opposing trans participation in women's sports, sparked backlash last month. The Women's National Basketball Players Association didn't take the bait. In a statement, the union said it embraces justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that hate, abuse, and demonization of any person or group of people, including transgender people, only fuel fear, division, and harm. They added poignantly, "We will not be used as political pawns," and neither will we. Our next story is San Francisco gay bars ditch facial scan technology after the community pushes back. So some good news out of the Castro. Two San Francisco gay bars, Toad Hall and Badlands, just discontinued their use of Patreon Scan Guard Plus, an AI-powered facial recognition system that was scanning Patreon's faces and government IDs at the door, collecting names, addresses, genders, and behavior data inside the venue. The company insisted it didn't sell the data to third parties, but at its own admission, it holds on flagged Patreon's information for up to 5 years. Digital privacy advocates and Patreons pushed back hard, especially given the current political climate, while federal counterterrorism strategy has explicitly named pro-transgender groups as a domestic threat. Our venues in the Castro represent a community that has fought hard for the right to exist freely and joyfully. The company in response said, effective immediately, we are pausing the use of Patreon Scan, a bar operator told reporters, adding that security teams will go back to manually checking IDs. 9 bars in the Castro had been using the tech. It's unclear whether the rest will follow suit. As one digital rights advocate put it, gay bars should be a place where we can gather without the fear of dangerous and invasive surveillance technology that has historically been weaponized against vulnerable communities. Glad to see at least 2 venues are listening. Let's hope the other 7 do as well. Now we go to Bolivia, where it recognizes its first same-sex marriage. So let's close our domestic section on something worth celebrating. After a legal battle stretching nearly 4 years, Fabina Branzer and Scarlett Roca became the first same-sex marriage to civilly marry in Bolivia, even though the country's constitution still technically limits marriage to heterosexual couples. The couple first applied for a marriage certificate back in October of 2022, backed by the LGBTQ rights group IGUAL Bolivia, leaning on the 2018 Regional Human Rights ruling that said countries in the Americas should extend marriage rights to same-sex couples. After 2 constitutional injunctions and years of litigation, they won, though the ruling technically applies only to them and not to the whole country. It makes me very happy to announce that our family and friends that after a legal fight of 3 years and 10 months, we have finally been able to access civil marriage as 2 women. Branzer wrote on Facebook, David Archipica, who won similar civil union back in 2020 with his husband, called it not a beginning, but a historical continuity, from the first recognized union to the first civil marriage. Marriage equality in Bolivia still isn't law in the land, but every single one of those individual victories chips away at the wall a little bit more. Congratulations to Fabina and Scarlett. Our next story is a 17-year-old French swimmer breaks a barrier and gets hit with a huge wave of hate. So let's go global, starting in France with 17-year-old Milan Velan just became the first man to represent France in artistic swimming at a major championship, competing with French team at a European Championships and Paris Saint-Denis in early August. Artistic swimming only opened to mixed gender teams a few years ago, and Velan's selection is being called a genuine milestone for a sport long coded as feminine. Instead of universal celebration, a short clip of him talking about the moment went viral on TikTok and Instagram and triggered a wave of sexist and homophobic comments. Violain told French outlets he saw a lot of nasty comments, some really disgusting, but he chose to speak publicly about it anyway, thinking of younger boys who messaged him ready to quit the sport over exactly this kind of hate. The French Swimming Federation didn't stay quiet either. They released a statement condemning the attacks as sexist, discriminatory, and hate-filled, reaffirmed that artist swimming is open to everyone, brought in a child protection nonprofit to get ahead of the hateful content taken down, offered Violain psychological support, and said they are filing a formal complaint with prosecutors. France's sports minister, Maria Ferrari, called the attacks unacceptable and pledged her full support. Violain's response to it all, in his own words, "I showed up as strong. I tried to rise above it." At 17, he's already teaching a masterclass in grace under pressure. I support him 100%, and I am so glad he stuck up for himself and clapped back at those people. And then 5 global equality champions honored at World Pride Amsterdam. So let's close with something genuinely uplifting. Earlier this month, the United Nations Development Program and ILGA World handed out the 2026 International Pride Awards during the World Pride Human Rights Conference in Amsterdam, honoring 5 people and organizations advancing LGBTQI+ equality across 4 continents. The honorees are South African Deputy Steve Letsky, recognized for the movement building in a hostile political environment, the Dutch human rights organization COC Netherlands, longtime Chilean trans activist Marcela De Monte, Ugandan trans pastor and community leader Agi Dennett Harmon, and honored for protecting trans, gender, diverse, and intersex people, and Indian disability rights advocate and LGBTQ+ ally, Dr. Santri Singh. ILGA's World Executive Director, Julie Ert, put it simply, these recipients show us how people advance equality for everyone by organizing, caring, documenting, teaching, and opening doors for others. Their work spans different countries and generations, but as she said, it's united by a belief in future where everyone can thrive free and be free from prejudice and fear. At a moment when so much of our news is about rollback and hostility, it's worth pausing on the fact that this work, the unglamorous, unpaid, often dangerous work of building equality, is still happening everywhere at all times. That's worth ending on. So that's your show for today, Wednesday, August the 12th. 8 stories, and every single one of them is a reminder that this is a fight being won in courtrooms, in bar districts, in union statements, on pool decks in France, on stages in Amsterdam, and in relationships that outlast the people trying to legislate them out of existence. If this show matters to you, follow Listen Up Girl wherever you listen, leave a review and a rating, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. You can also find us on Instagram at TheRealZachRE. Until next time, I'll see you with more LGBTQ news. Thanks for listening.